everyone, today I'm going to show you how to repot houseplants, especially my variegated string of pearls, which I have perpetually overwatered, so it actually got crown rot and started to die back. I don't tend to have issues with my string of pearls that are in smaller pots because it's easier then not to overwater because the water evaporates and is used a lot quicker than what it is in a larger pot. So I'm actually going to be downgrading the pot size for that one. We'll also repot a fiddle leaf fig that needs to go up into the next size pot, and I'll also do my philodendron minima. The main thing to be cautious of when repotting any houseplants, or any plants at all really, and dealing with potting mix or even garden soil, is that you need to be cautious of Legionnaire's disease. So the main reason people catch it from potting mix or compost is because they store it for too long in either like the garage, and then what happens is the bacteria breeds in the heat, and then when you open the bags the soil is not damp anymore, and then you're breathing in the air particles, which can make you really sick. To make sure you minimise your risk of catching Legionnaire's disease, there's some really easy tips you can do, and one of those is to open bags out in a well ventilated area, and then if the potting mix looks a bit dry, then give it a little bit of a drink with water. Make sure you're keeping your face away from the bags when you're doing so, and then after about an hour of it being in a well ventilated area, then you're free to use it. Also, it's a good idea always to do repotting in a well ventilated area outside. You shouldn't really do it inside. There's some really good tips on our website that I wrote last year about how to make sure you're safe against Legionnaire's disease, so if you would like the link for it, just let me know and I'll post it in the comments below. But anyway, so I've started by opening up my bag of O-Rings potting mix, and then I've let that air out for the last hour, and the other thing we're going to need, especially for winter repotting, is perlite. Perlite looks much like styrofoam does, and if you haven't got perlite, which many people won't have with the lockdown at the moment, you can substitute it with quite a few things. So if you Google, I saw that you can do it with the styrofoam meat trays that you get from the supermarket, so you could give that a crack. The other thing you can also use is the beans that you use in bean bags. So we're going to get started today, and the first thing we're going to start with is the string of pearls. The other thing I forgot to say before is if you have got immune deficiencies or you've got respiratory issues, you should wear a mask when dealing with potting mix, or when you're dealing with dry garden soil especially as well. The other thing you should also be wearing is gloves, and then avoid touching your face at all costs. So quality potting mix is essential for having good plants. You have to think about it in the fact that all the food and the nutrients that any plants are going to need are coming from their roots, which comes from the soil. So my best piece of advice is to buy and invest in the best quality potting mix that you can. So to start off, we are going to do the string of pearls, and I have started by making the mixture of the potting mix with the perlite, and because we're going into winter here, we are going to do a 50-50 mix with the perlite and the potting mix. The perlite's really essential for any houseplants because it helps to put air pockets into the soil, so that helps you, one, with not overwatering, but it also helps root health as they will then start burrowing their way into those gaps that that perlite creates. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the mix. You can tell it's really got a lot of the perlite in it, the white bits, and mixed in with the potting mix. So that's the 50-50 mix. And if I had all the ingredients available, we'd often use things like core fibre and fine pumice as well. But we're going to get started with this. So the idea of this is, you can see in here all these dead bits, is we want to take those out, but we also want to pin down these sorts of ones that are going to have a chance to regrow new roots. The best thing for using for pinning downs is old bobby pins. You can also use like bun net pins from ballet, or I use paper clips, which are just bent into shape like that to make it nice and easy. And because I want to pot down in size, because I'm overwatering in such a large pot, I've got that pot, but I'm going to cut it smaller because I don't actually have any smaller pots on hand at the moment. Okay, so this is the pot. It's about the same size, which defeats the purpose of me repotting it, so I'm going to put some cuts in around the lip of it. And then I'm just going to start cutting around the lip to make it a small size pot. The reason why this won't matter is because I put all my pots inside cover pots anyway, so you won't even be able to see this. I know it's a bit of a waste of a pot, but at least it's going to stop my string of pearls from dying. And then quite simply, I'm going to take out the pins that I've got in my string of pearls currently. I'm going to tip it out. Going to see what is actually attached. You can already see these bits here coming off because they haven't got any roots left. Actually, the whole thing's coming off because it hasn't got any roots left, which means all these little roots in here are going to die and be useless to us anyway. So then I'm going to fill up this pot, and because it doesn't have any roots, I don't need to leave any space for the new roots to form. Firm it down as much as you can, because otherwise when you water it, it's all just going to sink down and go lower. You want to leave it a little bit looser around the top though, so that the plants have a chance to root in. So with these guys here, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tidy up and take all these little dead bits off. Might even take him back to there. And then I'm going to start placing them around the pot. And once I've done this, I'll show you how I pin them down. Right, you can see now that I've wrapped all that around. Where possible, try to keep the stems flat and the pearl straits sitting up. It's not always possible, just get it as best as you can. And then you're just simply going to go like this and push those into place to hold those pearls down. The other thing you can do is, if you've got any fine pumice, you can actually put a layer of that over the top, because it will speed up the rooting process of those string of pearls. If you're using things like bobby pins, make sure you're careful that you stretch them out a little bit so they're not cutting into the stems of the plants. And I would probably come back and check this in a couple of weeks, just to make sure that those aren't pressing down too tightly and cutting off the stems. So next we're going to repot up this fiddle leaf fig. The main thing to remember with all houseplants is when you're repotting, only go to the next size up, otherwise it's really easy to overwater. I've actually had to go quite a bit bigger, because again this is all I had while we were on lockdown, but if you can, keep it to the next size up only, otherwise you're going to have to be really cautious with your watering, so that's something to be aware of. The reason you can tell the fiddle leaf fig is ready for repot is because the top surface roots are all showing. I'll show you a close up in a second, and when you pull it out of the pot you can see all these roots under here that are all getting really gnarly. So the reason we repot as well, not only to give it fresh nutrients, but also to help it retain its water. If it hasn't got any room for the roots to move, then the water's just going to run straight through and out the other end. If they're in a cover pot, that's not so bad, because they can absorb that water back up again, but certainly something to be careful of. So for the fiddle leaf fig, we're going to do 2 parts potting mix to 1 part perlite, so 70% really, and then another 30% of the perlite mixed in, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second as well. So the first tip is never to repot your plant any deeper than what it currently is. So you can see there I'm going to leave it about there. You also want to leave a water reservoir at the top, so that once you water it, the water can drip down through. So I can see here that I'm going to want it placed to about there. So having a look in there, I know that I need to add about that much soil to the base, so that's what I'm going to do first. You can see here the mixture is not quite as heavy in perlite. And the last thing we're going to do with this fiddle leaf fig is loosen up some of these excess hard roots. Not all plants can be done with this, so if you're not sure, please ask at your local garden centre, because you could inadvertently otherwise end up killing your plant. Once I've loosened those off with a knife, it's really easy just to do with your fingers. Give it a good loosen off at the bottom, like that, and then we're going to place it in the pot. I'm going to carry on through with my soil mix. Doesn't make enough of. To use the soil around the base. And you can see here I've planted it too deep compared to what it was originally in the pot, so I'm just going to lift a little bit and push in around the stems so there's no air pockets when I go to water. And you can see there's a nice water reservoir happening there, and you can see the roots that were there before, so that's perfect. Give a little bang on the table, make sure there are no air pockets, and then we're done for that guy. And lastly I'm going to do the philodendron minima. This guy takes the same soil mixture as the fiddle leaf fig, which is that 70% potting mix and 30% perlite. Now I don't think he's going to need to be teased in the roots too much, because you can see there he's already got quite a lot of loose soil on him. I'm just going to the next size up with that, which is one of our old tomato pots. If you're reusing any of your old pots, always make sure you give them a good wash and sterilise first in boiling water, or give it a good rinse out in the sink. Same thing again, I'm looking at the soil level to see where it needs to go so I don't plant it any deeper. I'm not going too much bigger in the pot size. The difficulty I'm going to have with this one is getting the bamboo in at the same time. Just pressing him down and around the sides. By the time I do that, the soil level's not going to be any different, and we are done for that. Last thing to note is you need to always water your houseplants thoroughly after repotting, so make sure you give them enough of a drink that the water runs out the bottom before you put back inside. The other question we often get asked after repotting is, can you reuse the old potting mix? Have a look at it, make sure there's no nasties in it, and if there's not, then certainly chuck it in the garden, but I wouldn't be using it for repotting your plants. The main reason for that is because the plants that were in it have already exhausted the fertiliser that is in the soil. So it's a good idea to get rid of it and always replace with fresh new potting mix. This was a typical time, we'd be using core fibre and fine pumice in our mixes as well, and we changed what we use depending on the plants. It's some of our secret recipes that we have to grow on really great plants. But in the meantime, the perlate's really good. It's going to help you stop overwatering, and especially for that string of pearls, you can see how much lighter and better that is already. Thanks guys! I was just giving these guys a water and then I forgot that I should mention one really, really important tip. It's all based on one question. Do you like having a cold bath? If the answer is no, your plants don't like having a cold bath either, so make sure the water is lukewarm or tempered to room temperature, and honestly your plants will love you for it instead of getting cold little feet and going into shock. Have fun!